The Kremlin had called Crimea the crown jewel of the Russian Empire. But today, the jewels have been removed from that crown, leaving only rust and dust behind. As Vladimir Putin looks at the maps on the Ukrainian front, the red line he left behind has long since been erased. With the first light of 2026, Crimea is under the greatest biological and logistical siege in its history. I'm not talking about missiles. I'm not talking about tanks. This time, the enemy is invisible. The enemy is the poison flowing from your taps, the salt drying up your fields, and the fuel missing from your tanks. Crimea, which Russia calls its unsinkable aircraft carrier, is now slowly turning into a giant ghost ship, along with its crew, dying of thirst and lack of fuel. Today on Mr. Warlog, we break through Russia's censorship wall to expose the cries of the people in Crimea, broken by thirst, and the dirty game Moscow is playing to hide this collapse. As the world celebrates the new year, Crimea's largest cities, Simferopol, Kerch, and Feodosia, awoke to medieval conditions. The taps ran dry. The Kremlin-controlled puppet institution Voda Krima, Crimean Waters, called this a technical malfunction, with classic Russian bureaucratic reflexes. "We are repairing it," they said. However, data from the field screams that this is not a repair, but a failure. Look, this is very critical. Even in the rare moments when water flows from the taps, what is flowing is not water. That yellow, foul-smelling liquid we saw in videos shared by Kerch residents on social media and quickly deleted. Russian officials shamelessly call it drinkable. Yet this is biological proof that the infrastructure has collapsed, that rust from the pipes and sewage have contaminated the drinking water. Russia is giving its people not water, but a slow-acting poison. So why can't Russia fix this? The answer lies in the reports of the Institute for the Study of War, ISW. In the 12 years since the invasion, Moscow has viewed Crimea solely as a massive military base. Billions of rubles have been spent on missile launchers and trenches, not on the underground water network. The result? 80% of Crimea's water infrastructure is decayed. So even if there is water in the dam, 80% of that water seeps into the ground and disappears before reaching your home. It's like trying to carry the ocean in a bucket full of holes. And now, they are paying the long-term price for the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam in 2023. The lifeline from the Dnieper River has been cut off. Crimea is now an island cut off from the mainland, drained of water. This is where the issue shifts from a humanitarian crisis to political immorality. According to UNN, United News Network reports, the Russian occupation administration has made a choice about who to give the last remaining water reserves to. Who do you think comes first? The local Crimean population, struggling with kidney disease due to dehydration? No. The priority is tourists from Russia and military facilities. According to leaked data from Ilya Nikolenko of Crimean Federal University, reservoirs lost 11 million cubic meters of water in May 2025 alone. The situation is even worse than the 2020 crisis. But what does Russian official Svetlana Shabalnikova say? "We will provide uninterrupted water to tourist areas." The meaning of this sentence is, the Crimean locals can die of thirst at home so that the elite vacationers from Moscow can sip their cocktails by the pool. This is class discrimination through water. It's a modern siege tactic. Without water, there is no life. But without water in Crimea, there is no economy either. According to reports by Crim.Really, Crimean agriculture is currently in a state of clinical death. Russia has announced an agricultural subsidy of 3 billion rubles for 2026. Sounds nice, doesn't it? But this is a complete Potemkin village story. Because you can't buy rain with money. You can't fill a dried-up river with money. Crimea's famous vineyards, rice fields, and corn crops are now on the brink of complete extinction after the frost and drought of 2025. Occupation Minister Denis Kratyuk says, "We will save viticulture." With what? With salty groundwater? Over-extraction of groundwater has caused soil salinization. Crimea's fertile lands are turning into toxic wasteland under Russian rule. Experts warn that repairing the North Crimean Canal could take until 2030. But by then, there will be no agriculture left in Crimea. When Russia seized Crimea, it was a garden. Now it is turning it into a desert and leaving it behind. Now close your eyes and imagine Crimea. Do you see green vineyards? Forget them. Northern Crimea is currently turning into a second Aral Sea disaster. The Izybilnoy Reservoir has invaded Crimea. This reservoir was once the deepest in the Crimean Peninsula, with a maximum depth of about 70 meters. It served as the main source of drinking water for Alushta and the surrounding villages. Today, it is almost completely empty. This is not an anomaly caused by drought. It is a direct result of Russia's own actions. After withdrawing from the right bank of Kherson, Russia destroyed the Kakhovska hydroelectric power plant dam in June 2023. This action lowered water levels in the upper basin and permanently disrupted the hydraulic pressure needed to feed the North Crimean Canal system. The network of canals that once supplied water from the Dnieper basin to Crimea can no longer function as intended. The strategic implication is quite clear. Russia deliberately cut off the water infrastructure it used to meet Crimea's water needs and then attempted to cover up the consequences through water restrictions, emergency drilling, and temporary reservoirs that cannot replace the lost system. This is self-inflicted infrastructure erosion, and it is a long-term situation. According to data from Ukrinform and environmental scientists, excessive extraction of groundwater has irreversibly altered the soil's chemistry. This is called salinization. Seawater is seeping into the depleted underground reservoirs. The soil is no longer fertile black earth, but a toxic salt swamp. When the wind blows, these salty and chemical dusts mix into the air and fill people's lungs. The soils of northern Crimea are now dead for agriculture. By 2026, not even grass will grow on these lands. Remember, in 2018, acid rain fell in Armyansk. Now this disaster is spreading across the entire peninsula. Russia thinks it has conquered Crimea, but what it actually holds is a rapidly decaying corpse. Nature is taking the most ruthless revenge for the mismanagement. Where there is scarcity, there is always a parasite feeding on it. The water crisis in Crimea has created a new, rich class, the water mafia. According to reports by the Kiev Post and local researchers, the billions of rubles in infrastructure funds sent by Russia are flowing into the pockets of local officials, not into the pipes. Here's how the system works. Water is cut off from the official network under the pretext that there is none. But an hour later, a private tanker with no official logo arrives in your neighborhood. The price? 50 times the normal rate, and they only take cash. Who owns these tankers? Leaked documents show that the trail of these ghost tankers leads to the local occupation administration and criminal organizations collaborating with them. While the people are dying of thirst, someone is making a fortune on the black market for water. This is the order that Russia calls Ruski Mir, Russian world, a feudalism where the powerful sell the last drop of water to the powerless. If the water crisis is the slow suffocation of Crimea, then the fuel crisis I'm about to describe is the bullet to its heart. Because if you don't have water, you transport it by tanker. But what if you don't have the diesel to run that tanker? That's when the game is over. According to the latest data from Intent.press and local sources, diesel has completely run out at gas stations in Crimea. First, premium gasoline ran out, and now diesel, the lifeblood of logistics, is gone. Why? Because Ukraine's long arm is at work. According to Reuters data, Ukrainian drones have crippled Russia's refinery capacity. Add to that the logistical chaos on the Kerch Bridge and ferry routes, and fuel imports to Crimea have come to a standstill. Governor Sergei Aksyonov says, "There is no problem." But reports from activists on the ground tell a different story. This is no accident. This is a surgical success of the Ukrainian armed forces. Storage facilities in Crimea have been hit. There are no stocks. Let's connect this to the bigger picture. Without diesel, agricultural machinery doesn't work. Without diesel, the tankers that bring water to the city don't work. Without diesel, even the military trucks carrying ammunition to the front lines come to a halt. Russia turned Crimea into a military base, but now it can't even bring in the fuel to run the base's generators. Protesting in Russia is equivalent to going to prison. But in Crimea, people are now overcoming their fear. Because thirst is a stronger urge than fear. According to reports, especially in Kerch and Sevastopol, the anger of the local population is turning from passive resistance to active protest. Searches on social media, phone checks, and sudden arrests. The FSB, Russian intelligence, is in a panic. Why? Because the people see this. There is fuel in the tanks of the Russian army. There is water in the villas of Russian commanders. The pools are full in the hotels of Russian tourists, but mud flows from the taps of the Crimean people. This is the Kremlin's worst nightmare. More than an attack from outside by the Ukrainian army, it is the people inside turning their backs saying, "You left us to die." The slogan, "Crimea is ours," is giving way to whispers of, "Crimea has become your grave." Let's look at the big picture, my friends. Putin thought that by taking Crimea, he would make Russia a superpower again. However, Crimea has turned into a black hole that consumes Russia's resources, destroys its prestige, and exposes its military inadequacy to the whole world. The 2026 projection is clear. If Russia continues its occupation, Crimea will become a deserted zone. Agriculture is finished. Tourism is gasping for breath under the shadow of weapons. And access to water, the most basic human right, has become a luxury. International law, the Geneva Convention, states that the occupying power is responsible for the health of the people it occupies. Russia not only failed this test, Russia deliberately and negligently threw the people of Crimea into the middle of an environmental disaster. As ISW says, the only sustainable solution is Russia's withdrawal, because Russia cannot govern Crimea. It only exploits it. And when there is nothing left to exploit, it will leave behind only salty soil and rusty pipes. Thirst won't kill you immediately, but dirty water? It might not get you through the night. In Crimea, it's not just the pipes that are collapsing. The human immune system is failing.